So let's get into this, debunking myth. So first, just to set the tone a bit, we're talking here mostly about nutrition, but some of these learnings can also apply to other FMCG products with a health impact or social impact that requires consumption frequency. But the first insight or the first myth we want to debunk is definitely around nutrition. And I want to start with just this couple of numbers. Realizing that lower income consumers globally are already spending 1.3 trillion a year on food and beverages. That's 1,300 billion, sorry, a year. That's a lot of money. And yet stunting and micronutrient deficiency is still very much present. How is that? This is really what we're trying to tackle here through the different tactics and myths we're going to try to debunk today. So a first myth that most people have is that undernutrition and stunting are problems for categories C, D, and E of the population, so the kind of three lowest wealth quintiles. And actually, data will show us that undernutrition is also present and quite in high percentages in richer quintiles, especially in developing countries. So if we look at the graph here, we basically have for 4 countries and then the average across 40 developing countries, which have high prevalence of stunting. The percentage across wealth quintile, A being the wealthiest on the left, to the E, the lowest quintile, the poorest people on the right. And as you can see, it is true that there is a bit less stunting in higher income populations. However, it's above 19%. So one child in 5, even among the wealthiest part of the population, is still stunted in these countries, which means that there will have irreversible consequence on their growth and on their intellectual potential growing up because they were not nourished well enough as children, as young children. So with that in mind, what can be done? And I mean, the good news is that there are already brands on the market that target specifically children between 6 and 24 months with appropriate nutrition products and complementary fortified foods. But these foods are typically for now targeted only at these higher wealth quintiles because basically today the cost of these products is basically between 12 and 26 times higher than the cost of a similar quantity of a non-fortified basic flour or a non-fortified meal. And you can see the data there from 5 different countries as to the difference in price between basic foods and these imported luxury brands. I just want you to remember this number for the next slides we're going to see. So 12 to 26 times higher price for these luxury brands. The second myth we want to discuss is that for these products, for children or for mothers, that can truly have a beneficial health impact, health benefits is what drives purchase. And actually, no, this is not true. People don't, even though they know, even when they know that it is important to purchase, to eat healthily, they don't all do that. Otherwise, all smokers would have stopped smoking if it was that easy to adopt a behavior which is better for you. And all of us on a diet would manage to lose pounds. So if health benefits don't drive purchase, what does? And what we found is that it's pleasure, it's convenience, it's aspiration that typically sell better than health. A few examples on this. Coming from a study we did 6 years ago on best practices in marketing nutritious foods for low-income populations, in particular looking at these complementary foods for 6 to 24-month-olds. The first thing that parents told us about how they decided to feed their children is a bliss factor for their children. So the fact that the child eats easily. I have young children and I can testify to this. You're not trying 5 times to give them something they will spit out at you. So parents say they're buying it because their children like it. A second factor that's important is to have a familiar food form. Example there from 4 different countries. The first one in Madagascar, a product that sells quite well, fortified infant porridge that sells well, is koba aina, which is a rice porridge sold by Nutrizaza. And they designed it really as to mimic the vari sosoa, the rice porridge that is locally, that is the local kind of staple food in Madagascar. Similarly, there is a product with similar virtues in South Africa called EPAP, which again mimics both the texture and the name of the local pap porridge that people typically eat. In Bangladesh, a multi-nutrient powder have worked quite well. It's one of the countries where this type of micronutrient powders have been most successful because, probably partly because people are used to adding spices on their food. So adding a powder form on top of a meal is not something new. It's not asking people for a new behavior. On the contrary, in Indonesia, there were similar trials to introduce these micronutrient powders that worked much less well, because in Indonesia, if it is about health, people are basically used to having vitamin in the form of pills. So for them, adding a powder to have vitamins in the meal didn't feel right. And so similar programs, even though the products were given out for free, didn't manage to get a high consumption rate because it just didn't feel right for people to use micronutrient powders to get micronutrients. Another thing that even low-income consumers value is convenience. And we have seen that 2 examples here is the first one on the left is this koba aina porridge in Madagascar, carried by these sales ladies you see on the left, who basically bring warm porridge at the time of breakfast to young children in the streets of Madagascar. And it takes them only 4 to 6 weeks to saturate an area to reach the maximum penetration of young children consuming the product in the areas where they are present, which is much faster by a factor of 2 or 3 compared to when the product is only available in retail. It's basically really helping drive adoption because it's so convenient. Another way that has shown how low-income consumers value convenience is that they're actually ready to pay for delivery of items that are considered bulky or heavy to carry. Like in the case of Nandi Water on the right, which purifies water through purification plants in India. You have a choice when you buy from them to either get the product, this jug of 20 liters for, at the time when we did the study, about 3 rupees per jug, or to get it delivered at your place for a price that can double or even quintuple depending on how far you are from the plant. And there were about half of the 50% of the villagers in the villages where there was this option opted for the delivery, even if it was significantly more expensive, even if it was rural India and they didn't have a lot of money, because it was saving them time and effort. And actually, when you have little money, you also typically have little time. And so it was actually worth for them doing that extra effort. So now that we have understood what consumers value, what can we say about the price of products? So a third myth we're going to look at is that C&D consumers, so low-income consumers, need cheap products. You'll notice we're not talking about e-consumers, the poorest, because we recognize that typically the poorest in all these countries are unlikely to be able to be supported or to be able to afford any sort of market-based products. And so we're talking here about low-income population, but not the poorest of the poor. So going back to this third myth, C&D consumers need cheap products. Actually, what we found, in line with what we've seen they're ready to pay for things they value, is that they're really willing to pay more for risk-free holistic solutions. The risk-free aspect of things is really key for them because they don't have a safety net. So they can't afford to make a mistake when they buy something. They can't afford to buy something cheap that won't work. An example on this that is not from the nutrition sector is from Wanaka Fund, a social enterprise slash NGO working in several countries in East Africa that is selling a package of inputs to low-income farmers that typically have 1 acre of land, in this case in rural Kenya. Farmers have the choice of purchasing the inputs at their traditional input traders. It costs $91 for 1 acre of field, and they have $2 extra for a home delivery cost, or themselves going to buy the products. And basically, Wanaka Fund at the time had managed to convince 80,000 farmers a year, and now they've grown to over 100,000, potentially even closer to 200 just in Kenya, and same in similar countries around. They basically managed to convince these low-income farmers to pay more for a bundle because they bring them so much added value that really ensure they're going to be successful with their harvest. So the package that Wanaka Fund provides is not just the inputs, not just the delivery, but also includes a loan whereby farmers are able to repay little by little as they get their harvest throughout the year. Insurance, so that if they fail, you know, the Wanaka Fund won't have to go after their relatives. And then also training to make sure that they're, you know, they know how to plant and they're going to get the best results out of their plantation for the year. And with this, back in 2014, they had achieved 100% repayment rate because the farmers didn't want to get kicked out of the program once they had seen how it worked. That's the only thing that happened. If you basically weren't repaying, you couldn't apply the following year. And because of all these services, even if it was more expensive, they were getting such a better harvest that they really wanted to stay in. So actually providing that holistic solution, if it truly brings value to your consumers, is something lower income clients are totally ready to pay for. So what does that mean for nutrition? You might remember that initial chart that showed that luxury brands of infant porridge were about 12 to 26 times more expensive than typical basic foods. Some companies have taken the opportunity that is between that, you know, basic price and the 26 times to create products that are more affordable, but that are still more expensive than the basic product because they are better quality. They have so much more nutrition in them, including micronutrients. So across Rwanda, Madagascar, Burkina Faso, South Africa, and Ivory Coast, we found good quality products that were sold 3 to 8 times more than the basic flour there. And that had all achieved over 10,000 consumers, daily consumers, across these kind of lower income, you know, B2D income segments. And the consumers we talked to explained that they bought this product because they wanted the best they could afford for their children. Even though, yes, it was more expensive than the other alternatives, but they really believed in the benefits the brand could bring them, and so they were ready to pay for it. There is basically space for positioning two different products, even for an affordable brand, basically adding a second premium brand that would still be more affordable than the incumbent luxury brands present in these countries. Because between the price of the basic affordable brands, 3 to 6 times the price of basic food, between that and the 13 to 26 times, you still have space to create a higher margin premium brand for lower income populations that could help improve the P&L of these products. So there is not there is not just one product positioning possible, even when we think about more affordable products. A fourth myth we will be looking at today is that investing in educating consumers is critical. And actually what we find is that very often in the chain of that consumer journey, in that consumer journey, the understanding of the problem is not where there is the biggest issue. Many consumers are aware of product benefits, but don't trust that they will really deliver. They're aware of the issue, aware they should eat better in the case of nutrition. But when you tell them that product is going to solve everything, they don't believe it. And you know, if they don't consume it regularly, they're actually probably right. But let's look at this from a broader perspective across other sectors. So on this slide, you can see the results of two awareness campaigns that were done on the left for irrigation pumps and on the right for improved cook stoves, and how they managed to increase product awareness as well as result in purchase. So on the left for irrigation pump, that 1 year marketing campaign has resulted in extremely high product awareness. 84% of consumers knew about these irrigation pumps. 63% stated they understood how the product worked. And yet there was only 13% sales penetration, which was just an increase by 6 or 7% from the previous year where the product was already in market. If we look then at the improved cook stove example, which is quite similar, after an awareness and health campaign around cook stoves, 69% of the people said they understood the impact of cook stoves or cooking on an open fire on their health. 83% of people said they would purchase the improved cook stoves that reduced those fumes and were going to be beneficial to their health. And yes, only 2% actually purchased. And when they were asked why they didn't purchase, 98% of these people said it was too expensive. But these stoves actually save people money and reimburse payback from themselves in a matter of a few months. So when you say something that's going to pay back in 3 or 6 months is too expensive, what you actually mean, which is what's the next answer, is that you're not convinced that this is true, right? It looks too good to be true. People were not convinced of product benefits. And this is true across the board for beneficial products for lower income population. These people have been cheated so many times that they won't believe it until you really prove to them that what you're telling them is true. So how to do that? It basically takes winning one community at a time. Winning one community at a time, because word of mouth is really key in those environments. So on this little graph, you can see, like, obviously you need, especially when consumption frequency is important, you need to ensure product availability. But then you also need to ensure your demand creation strategy really works across these 3 steps. So first, creating demands, with aspirational message from trusted channel to get from your initial community a stock, quote unquote, of aware tempted prospects. Then you need to make sure these people try the product for the first time so they can experience the benefit themselves. So this is typically done via active selling, such as demonstration events or door-to-door promotions. And then you get from this tempted prospect to buyers. And this is the step that people most often forget, you need to make sure your buyers are satisfied and that they come back. You can't stop your marketing efforts just once the first sale is done, especially for products that require consumption frequency to truly deliver on their benefits. So getting that long-term adoption, making sure you have a good after-sale service, good reminders, and also encouraging word of mouth is really critical and very often completely overlooked by marketing teams. No offense, Sam, not you, of course. You always think of these things. How to do this at each of these steps? And also, one thing I didn't mention is that encouraging word of mouth is also very key to ensure there is no negative word of mouth, especially if you've said, your food product was really going to help the health of your children and people consume it just once a week and don't see any change because they're only consuming it once a week. They're going to tell everyone around them, don't buy this brand. They're actually not delivering at all on their promise. So you really want to make sure you avoid this kind of mistrust that then creates negative word of mouth. So we'll look at just one example at each of these steps. So first, on creating demand creation for nutritious products, even though health arguments are not the only ones that sell, for the first purchase, health professionals can really be a key trigger or first try because of that requirement for trust creation. And we've looked here at 3 different programs, BRAC, which were selling micronutrient powder, NutriFaso, which was selling infant porridge door-to-door in Burkina Faso, and PKL that were selling fortified porridge through retail and pharmacies in Ivory Coast. And for all these, and we could have drawn a similar graph for the other programs we looked at, the health professionals, which is the deep purple, I don't know how to call that color, the lower part of this graph, was really the main source of of awareness of, you know, how people learned about the product for the first time before buying. But then, interestingly, as you can see, PKL had been there for longer, and they also had a significant share of people who had heard about the product from family and friends. So at the beginning, health professionals are really key. But as the product evolves, that word of mouth really kicks in and can become an even stronger source of marketing than health professionals, even for health products. So once that kind of general awareness and trust is created, or together with that health professional endorsement, another way to create a bit and push awareness is to and push for trial is to push aspirational messages, and this can be done both with above the line and below the line. An example on above the line, which was a campaign done by Monimix, also a micronutrient powder in Bangladesh, is that they ran campaigns that were really aspirational. The year before that, they had run a general campaign around it's important to eat well and micronutrient powders can be a good solution, but it wasn't branded and it didn't talk at all about aspirations and it had no effect on sales. The next year, they ran their own marketing campaign, very aspirational, as you can see here. With the first episode was basically a fireman dad. No, actually, I got this wrong. It was a father, sorry, who explained that his child saved him from the fire, and that was because, you know, he was strong and he had all the energy to go and get support, and because he was consuming Monimix. And the second one was about two mothers and their children chatting in a train, one with a very active child and the other one with a very sleepy child. And the mothers discussed, and of course, the one who has an active child, her son has been consuming Monimix. So that's on above the line. On below the line, you can replicate this kind of aspirational campaign, like Nutrifaso selling their porridge in Burkina Faso did by creating a sort of prize for good mothers. So to get the prize, you had to breastfeed your younger children. You had to introduce appropriate complementary feeding from 6 months of age. You also had to go to the healthcare practitioners, the community health centers regularly to get your vaccines and health checks. But then you got this prize in front of the entire village. They basically organized these party-like moments where these good mothers were recognized in front of everyone, not just the other women, but also the entire ecosystem, who can then become a source of encouragement for other mothers to follow a similar path. Talking of which, what we found is that across all these examples, even for the health of mothers or the health of children, it is very important to not just focus on the mother, but actually on the whole value system, or the whole ecosystem that actually influences them. We have an example here of a campaign that WPP had done with Nestle, where they basically promoted breastfeeding across India, and really targeting not just the mothers, but also other women in the household, mother-in-laws, the fathers, of course, and key opinion leaders, in particular in the health ecosystem. And they managed to get really good results, including 15,000 doctors pledging to actively promote exclusive breastfeeding, and the replication of the campaign in other countries, with over 9 million views just in India, of people who were looking at the campaign. So now we've seen how to get consumers excited about the product, making it aspirational. We've seen how to trigger first try with the health professionals. So now, how do we make sure we encourage regular use? And you can find more on this in the fourth module of this series, with a lot of tactics that actually help really focus that on consumption frequency. But I'll just give you a glimpse now of the subscription schemes that two organizations we visited have put in place. So the first one is basically ensuring commitments through subscription cards, which is what Nandi Water does with this card with 30 holes that you can only use for a month to get your water jugs from their purification plants. So if you don't use the 30 holes by the end of the month, you lose the days you have already paid for. So obviously they found it was a very efficient commitment device to ensure that their client were really consuming only their water and hence getting the health benefits of having clean water every day. Nutrifaso tried something similar, so selling their warm porridge in the streets of Ouagadougou with a very simple prepaid card for 6 to 13 days, which didn't get any discount on the product, but mothers really appreciated the fact that they were able to give the money in one go and then not have to think about it, not have to wonder whether they would have the cash for their child to have their healthy porridge in the morning. And they found that within a matter of a few weeks, half of their clients chose to switch to the card. So really, we're happy to actually have that kind of commitment device again to make sure they were able to provide adequate food to their children every day. So we had 4 myth busted, so 4 learnings, and we just want to leave you with 4 provocations for your own products or your own endeavors providing quality products for lower income consumers. So the first one, which was around undernutrition, which is also present in richer quintiles. Whatever social issue you're focusing on, you might find something similar, that actually it's not just the lower income population that faces issues in the country where you're working. So should we design your value proposition and your price just for C and D consumers, or maybe start with A and B, maybe think about a dual value proposition, as we've seen in some examples here. The second one was that pleasure, convenience, and aspiration sell better than health. So even if you're doing your project or selling your products for a purely social and health impact, is there any way you can make sure to offer a truly superior experience to your consumers, even if they're low income? It doesn't mean they don't have aspirations, and it doesn't mean just because a product is good for them, they'll consume it if there's nothing else attached to it. The third one was that lower income C&D consumers are ready to pay more for risk-free holistic solutions they value. So that risk-free holistic piece is really key. What can you do? What would it take to make your offer more holistic and really ensure that your clients get the full benefits from the products you're providing them? And finally, last one, many consumers are actually aware of but do not trust the product benefits. So how do you overcome that barrier? Should you reallocate some marketing spend to more below the line activities or direct sales activities that will really focus on that last bit of the consumer journey, ensuring consumer satisfaction, helping them make the right choice over time and consume your product frequently so that they can derive the full impact from what you're selling them? So with that, I'll hand it over to Sam for conclusion.
Thanks so much, Lucie. Well, so much in there for some of the myths that we need to debunk and address with driving consumption frequency to lower income consumers. And throughout that presentation, Lucie's begun to share and start to seed some of the potential solutions for us to achieve this. As you stay on this journey with us, the next stage is really about defining the opportunity for us to engage in. What's the most relevant product category to help us to drive sustainable impact at scale, and what's the most relevant strategy by which to achieve that? We'll explore the customer journey, a user journey. What stage of change might they be in, whether that's a successful first trial all the way through to compliant and frequent loyal consumption. And then we move to delivering. So how we can actually begin to embed some of these tactics more purposefully in our marketing initiatives and our customer engagement. So thank you for watching thus far. A huge thanks to Lucie for that overview of some of the myths that we're now debunking. Now it's time to move on to the rest of the framework. Until next time.